The wind howled through the Appalachian pines, clawing at our tent like it knew the secrets we hadn't yet spoken. I was shivering, not just from the cold, but from the weight of what I'd carried for years, me love for Ethan, my straight best friend, who was now half naked beside me, his breath warm against my neck. The tense rip had forced us into this moment, and as he whispered my name, Luca, I felt the world tilt, threatening to unravel everything I thought I knew about us. It started innocently enough, a weekend camping trip in North Carolina's Blue Ridge Mountains. Ethan had pitched it as a chance to escape our senior year at UNC, to ditch the textbooks and fraternity noise for something raw and real. I'd agreed, partly because I loved the outdoors, but mostly because I'd follow Ethan anywhere. His easy grin, the way his hazel eyes caught the sunlight, had hooked me since we met in freshman chem lab. He was straight, always had a girlfriend or a fling, and I'd learned to bury my feelings deep, content with friendship. Or so I thought. We'd hiked all day, laughing over dumb inside jokes. Ethan teasing me about my city boy hiking boots while he strode ahead in his worn-out sneakers. By dusk, we found a clearing near a stream, perfect for camp. Ethan set up his ancient Tinta hand-me-down from his dad while I gathered firewood. This thing's seen better days, he'd said, tugging at the faded nylon. I'd laughed, not knowing it would betray us later. Night fell, and the temperature plummeted. We sat by the fire, passing a flask of bourbon Ethan had snuck into his pack. His stories about his latest breakup with Sarah filled the air, and I listened, nodding, pretending my heart didn't ache every time he mentioned her. You ever been in love, Luca? He asked suddenly, his voice softer than usual. I froze, the flask halfway to my lips. Yeah, I said, staring into the flames. It's complicated. He didn't push, just gave me that half smile that made my chest tight. We crawled into the tent around midnight, the bourbon leaving us loose and a little reckless. Ethan stripped off his shirt, claiming he was too hot, and I tried not to stare at the way the firelight danced across his shoulders. I zipped my sleeping bag up to my chin, hoping the darkness hid the flush creeping up my neck. We talked for a while, about nothing and everything: graduation, our fears, the future. Then the wind picked up, a low moan turning into a scream. A sharp rip tore through the night, and cold air flooded the tent. Shit. Ethan scrambled to inspect the damage. A long gash ran down the tent's side, the fabric flapping uselessly. This thing's toast, he muttered, poking at the tear. The wind was relentless, and within minutes, our sleeping bags were dusted with pine needles. We're gonna freeze, I said, half joking, but my teeth were already chattering. Only one thing to do, Ethan said, his voice steady but laced with something I couldn't place. We gotta share body heat. Before I could protest, he dragged his sleeping bag next to mine, unzipping it to make a blanket. Come on, Luca, don't be weird about it. My heart pounded as he slid in beside me, his bare chest brushing my arm. The tent was too small for space, too broken for privacy. I could feel every inch of him warm, solid, alive. We lay there, the wind roaring outside, the torn tent barely holding together. Ethan's breathing slowed, and I thought he'd fallen asleep until he shifted closer, his lips grazing my ear. Luca, he whispered, and my name sounded different in his mouth, fragile, like a confession. I turned my head, our faces inches apart, and his eyes locked onto mine. What are we doing? I managed, my voice barely audible. I don't know, he said, but he didn't pull away. His hand found mine under the sleeping bag, his fingers hesitating before intertwining with mine. My pulse was a drumbeat, drowning out the wind. I've been thinking about you, he said, so quiet I almost missed it. Not just tonight, For a while, I wanted to laugh, to cry, to scream. Ethan, my straight friend, the guy who dated half the sorority, was saying this. "You're drunk," I said, trying to protect myself from hope. He shook his head, his thumb brushing over my knuckles. "I'm not. I'm scared, Luca, but I'm not drunk." The air between us crackled, heavy with years of unspoken truths. I'd spent so long hiding, convincing myself I could live with just his friendship. But now he was here, tearing down every wall I'd built. I leaned in, testing the waters, and when he didn't pull back, I kissed him. It was tentative at first, like we were both afraid the world would end if we crossed this line. But then he kissed me back, fierce and hungry, and the cold didn't matter anymore. We didn't sleep much that night, tangled in each other's arms, whispering things we'd never dared say aloud. He told me about the doubts he'd buried, the way he'd caught himself watching me during study sessions, the confusion that had kept him up at night. I told him about the ache I'd carried since freshman year, the way I'd memorized every laugh, every glance. The torn tent became our sanctuary, a fragile cocoon where we could be honest for the first time. Morning came too soon, the sunrise bleeding through the rip in the tent. Ethan's arm was still around me, his breathing steady against my shoulder. But as the light grew, so did the weight of reality. We packed up in silence, the air thick with questions neither of us was ready to answer. What did this mean? Was it just the bourbon, the cold, the isolation of the mountains? Or was it something real, something that could survive beyond this trip? Back at UNC, things got messy. Ethan didn't pull away, but he didn't know how to move forward either. He'd hold my hand in private, steal kisses in his dorm when his roommate was out. But in public, he was still the frat guy, the straight guy. I tried to be patient, knowing he was wrestling with a part of himself he'd never faced. But every time he introduced me as just a friend, it cut deeper than I'd expected. One night, at a party, I saw him flirting with a girl from his econ class. My stomach twisted, and I left without a word. He found me later, outside my apartment, his face flushed with guilt. "Luca, I'm trying," he said, his voice breaking. "This is new for me. I don't know how to do this." I wanted to yell, to tell him I wasn't an experiment, but the fear in his eyes stopped me. Instead, I pulled him inside, and we talked until dawn about his family's expectations, his fear of judgment, my own struggles coming out to my parents. We decided to take it slow, to figure it out together. It wasn't perfect. There were fights, moments of doubt, times when I wondered if I was asking too much of him. But there were also mornings when he'd wake up next to me, his smile soft and unguarded. And I believe we could make it work. We started small, holding hands at a coffee shop, telling a few close friends. Each step felt like a victory, a defiance of the world's rules. By graduation, Ethan had changed. He wasn't hiding anymore. At the ceremony, he found me in the crowd, his cap crooked, and kissed me in front of everyone. There were gasps, a few whispers, but mostly cheers. His parents were there, and I saw the shock on their faces. But Ethan didn't flinch. "I'm done pretending," he told me later. "I love you, Luca. I'm all in." We moved to Asheville after graduation, chasing a life where we could be ourselves. The mountains that had brought us together became our home, a reminder of that night when a torn tent changed everything. We weren't perfect, but we were real, and in a world that often tried to tear us apart. That was enough. Our story wasn't just about love. It was about courage, about choosing truth over fear. Ethan's journey from confusion to acceptance taught me that love doesn't always come easily, but it's worth fighting for. And as we built a life together, I realized that sometimes the things that break like tents Like hearts are what let the light in.